Limit is t goes to 2 of t plus 2 over t plus 6 minus 2t over 3t plus 2, the entire thing over t to the 4th minus 16. The first thing we're going to do is try plugging a 2 in for all of the t's. In the numerator, that'll be 2 plus 2 over 2 plus 6 minus 2 times 2 over 3 times 2 plus 2. And in the denominator, that will give us 2 to the 4th minus 16. Back to the numerator, 2 plus 2 is a 4, over 2 plus 6 is an 8, minus 2 times 2 is a 4, over 3 times 2, which is a 6, plus 2, and then all of that over 2 to the 4th, which is a 16, minus a 16. In the numerator, we have 4 over 8 minus 4 over 6 plus 2, which is also an 8, over 16 minus 16. So in the numerator, 4 over 8 minus 4 over 8 is a 0, and the denominator, 16 minus 16, is also a 0. We have the 0 over 0 indeterminate form. We will need to rework this. Since we have fractions that are combining, we will need to use the common denominator method. So we'll need the common denominator between those two fractions. Since neither t plus 6 nor 3t plus 2 factor any further, the common denominator will be t plus 6 times 3t plus 2. So what we're going to do now is multiply the t plus 2 over t plus 6 by 3t plus 2 over 3t plus 2, a form of 1, and 2t over 3t plus 2 by t plus 6 over t plus 6, also a form of 1, to produce the common denominator. And all of this is over t to the 4th minus 16, which doesn't have any fractions, so we're just going to leave that alone for now. Now, when it comes to fractions with common denominators, you will want to fully FOIL out and distribute the numerators so that we can combine them. This first set of fractions multiplying each other, we do have to FOIL out those two numerators with each other. T plus 2 times 3t plus 2. The first is t times 3t. That will be a 3t squared. The outside is t times a positive 2. That'll be plus 2t. The inside is 2 times a 3t. That'll be a plus 6t. And the last is 2 times 2. That's a plus 4. All of that will be over the common denominator of t plus 6 times 3t plus 2. Minus, and for the second one, we're going to multiply these numerators with each other. 2t will distribute onto the t plus 6. 2t times t is 2t squared, and then 2t times 6 is a 12t. And we're going to subtract all of that. It will also have that same common denominator. Notice that I'm not FOILing out the denominators. You want to keep those factors. It's just the numerator that needs to be FOILed out and distributed and everything so that we can combine them. They actually combine together. The denominators are just common denominators. They just need to match each other, and then they just stay that same denominator. So we now have limit is t goes to 2. In the numerator, we will have 3t squared plus 2t plus 6t plus 4 minus a 2t squared. We're distributing this minus sign. This minus sign will affect both of these terms here. So that's going to not only be a negative 2t squared, it's also going to be a negative 12t. All this over the common denominator of t plus 6, 3t plus 2, and then the entire thing over t to the 4th minus 16. The next step is to combine together any like terms that you may have in the numerator of the fractions we just combined up here, all of those terms up there. I actually see a 3t squared and a minus 2t squared. That's the first terms that will combine into a positive 1t squared. I see a positive 2t, a positive 6t, and a minus 12t. That's going to be 8t minus 12t, which is a negative 4t. And then I see a constant of plus 4. There's no other constants, so that just comes along with this. This will be over the common denominator of t plus 6 and 3t plus 2. And then the entire thing is over t to the 4th minus 16. Our next step is to take the denominator fraction and reciprocate it and multiply it. Well, it's not a fraction right now, so I'm going to put it over a 1 so it has now become a fraction. So now we can go through the step of reciprocate and multiply. So I will have t squared minus 4t plus 4 over t plus 6 times 3t plus 2 times the reciprocal, which is 1 over t to the 4th minus 16, and that will multiply everything. So now we multiply the numerators with each other, so we will have all of this times that. Well, times 1, we'll just keep the same expression. So this will be limit as t goes to 2 of t squared minus 4t plus 4 over the entire denominator, which will be t plus 6 times 3t plus 2 times t to the 4th minus 16. Now we still have 0 over 0. We haven't yet canceled the terms that are making the 0 over 0 just yet. Since t is going to 2, I expect to see either a t minus 2 factor or a 2 minus t factor in both the numerator and the denominator. I don't see it in either just yet, so that means they must be found within these bigger expressions that can factor. So we are now going to set about factoring those big expressions. In the numerator, that's a trinomial quadratic. That can factor into t and t. We need two numbers that multiply to be a positive 4 and add to be a negative 4. I believe minus 2 and minus 2 fit that. In the denominator, the t plus 6 and the 3t plus 2 don't factor any further, but the t to the 4th minus 16 is actually a difference of squares and will further factor. It will factor into a t squared plus 4 and a t squared minus 4. Now I see the t minus 2 in the numerator. There's actually two of them. I don't see one in the denominator just yet, but that's because that portion of it is again a difference of squares and further factors. This is what happens when you have a fourth order. It will factor, and then the difference will factor further. The sum, this one right here, won't actually factor any further, just the difference will. And so that's our next step, is to factor that further. And so we'll have limit as t goes to 2. In the numerator we have t minus 2 squared. In the denominator we will have a t plus 6, a 3t plus 2, a t squared plus 4, a t plus 2, and a t minus 2. There is a t minus 2 in the numerator and denominator both. We can cancel. There's two of them in the numerator, so we'll cancel out one of them by canceling out that square and cancel that out. Now we finally remove the 0 over 0 that we were encountering before. So let's just rewrite what we have left. In the numerator we have left a t minus 2. In the denominator we have left a t plus 6, a 3t plus 2, a t squared plus 4, and a t plus 2. We can now plug a 2 in for all of the t's. In the numerator, that will give us 2 minus 2. In the denominator, we will have 2 plus 6 times 3 times 2 plus 2. Times 2 squared plus 4 times 2 plus 2. In the numerator, we have a 0. In the denominator, 2 times 6 is an 8. 3 times 2 is 6, plus another 2 is another 8. 2 squared is a 4, plus a 4, which is yet another 8. And then 2 plus 2 is a 4. But none of that matters, because in the numerator we have 0, and in the denominator we have some non-zero number. And 0 over any non-zero number is always equal to 0. So after all that work, this limit is actually equal to 0.